Hi everyone. I decided to make a video today. Happy October. Um, it's been kind of a crazy month. So much has been going on in the trucking world. And so we've just been trying to keep up with all of it. A lot of it good stuff, but it could very well go back to same old if we don't stay on top of it. I wrote a couple letters that I submitted. Usually, when I write a letter, I put it on our website, but I may not have time to do that this week or next week. So I wanted to give kind of an overview, and they're somewhat related to driver. First one was a bill that came out last few weeks. I'm gonna see if I can put it on my screen and give you like a little overview of it somehow or another. Here we go. Here it is. I don't think I'm going to share my screen this time, but I might just read a little bit of it to you. The oh, that's the other one. It's this one. Um okay. So I sent this a couple weeks ago in its entire length. And then I attached some recent prime settlements to it also. And the bill first letter is regarding support for the Predatory Truck Leasing Prevention Act, HR 5423. Julia Brownlee of California introduced it, and um, OIDA is supporting it, and so are the Teamsters. Um, Real Women in Trucking submitted contract samples during the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration Truck Leasing Task Force. And we also gave recommendations on who should be on it. Um, in the movie Driver, you see that I was affected by a predatory lease program. It was a third party lease, and I write a little bit about that in this letter. But how the catalyst for all of that, it's not explained in the movie Driver, kind of snowballed, was that my trailer got hijacked in South Florida in 2018 on the 4th of July, early in the morning. So the content of the second letter I wrote is about cargo theft. But let's start with the first letter that I wrote to Congresswoman Brownlee, because I think this is an important bill. Um, I already got a co-sponsor, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton in DC. And I'm trying to go and find all the direct email addresses I've had from the past, because it's easier to send it that way than trying to get through their website. And I don't have the time or funding right now to send out letters by mail, because I have to address them all. I have some lacking ability to do some of that stuff and pay for postage and do like a mass mail out campaign. But I welcome anybody that would help me do that. Anyone could take this letter, revise it, and send it to their own elected representative. When we did Jason's Law, um, first it started out as a petition drive, and the 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 bill got introduced by Paul Tonko, Hope Rivenberg and her family went and talked to him and explained the situation. If you don't know what Jason's Law is, it's what made truck parking an eligible activity for federal funding when and made states have to do freight plans and then they could apply for the funding. And so a lot of the truck parking projects you see today actually started 5, 6, 7 years ago. And they came about and got funding because of Jason's Law. A lot of drivers don't know that. Anyway, Paul Tonko introduced the bill in the House, and then you have to get a certain amount of co-sponsors to move the bill. And then the Senate also has to introduce a bill, or it can be vice versa, and they have to get so many people to sign on before it can advance to a certain extent. Okay. So introducing the bill is just like the first step in many steps. And sometimes the bills run out of time at the end of the year and they have to be reintroduced. So a lot of them go nowhere. Jason's Law had to be reintroduced a couple times and then it finally passed. And one of the things that happened when it was reintroduced is a lot of the set aside funding got gutted out of it, and then now there's others that are trying to get set aside funding, but they don't want Jason's Law, Jason Rivenberg's murder that was the catalyst for that in the text, but it's already in the law. Anyway, that's a whole other issue. What I'm saying is, this is a really important issue, the truck leasing, predatory leasing, and receiving the prime settlements to attach to them really helps illustrate that. I explained to the congresswoman and the others that have been able to get a hold of that we have seen drivers who have worked super hard to get every payment in there, and then they make the last payment and the company slides some pages in there that have a balloon payment that wasn't there when they signed the contract in the first place. One was Tamara Brock, and she was on the truck leasing task force. And I mean, she was really upset. She worked so hard. She helped promote that company on her YouTube channel, and then they did this to her. And, because she has a big social media following, they negotiated privately with her. That company, I don't even think is around. I think they went out of business, LTI. Brittany Richardson, I'm sure a lot of you know her from social media. RTI withheld her heavy vehicle use tax form, so she was kind of in a bind. They took her off her dedicated route. She wasn't getting miles. They wouldn't take a payment on the truck from her personal account. They would only take it from the load she was on, but she wasn't getting any miles. And she went through a mess with that. And she actually gave us permission to use some of her stuff to submit to the truck leasing task force. In any case, what they found was that these lease purchases, most of them are just complete fraud. And so we were really happy to see that OIDA and the Teamsters are supporting this bill. And I wanted to show some examples to the Congresswoman and show our support too, because we do know that a lot of the starter companies used the new students to do team driving, which is really unsafe. They don't tell them your training is going to require you to do some of the most dangerous work that experienced drivers won't do. And they demand premium pay to do it. And we've figured out a way to make you guys do it because you don't know any better and you're just trying to break into this industry. So we're getting ready to come into winter, and you all are going to start seeing a lot of crashes. And those crashes are going to be those drivers that don't have a lot of experience that are being required to do team driving and run that truck 24 hours a day instead of using good common sense and knowing when the weather conditions are unsafe to operate the truck. There's a lot of employer-driven debt in uh, training fleets with the tuition and with the lease purchase trucks. And a lot of the time, the only way the student can get out of doing the team driving component is to sign on to lease purchase. And a lot of times the trainer is getting a kickback to indoctrinate the student into the idea that this is the way to go when they themselves are not really making enough money. And that's why they became a trainer. And I explained that in the letter that companies like Prime, they, are basically on a truck with a trainer that is a salesperson for 30 days, or whatever amount of time they're with them. Everybody's trying to tell them how great it is to be an owner op. You are not an owner op when you're in lease purchase. You're a misclassified worker. You are a misclassified worker. And so the ATA took DeSova to Washington, D.C., and has been recording these little film, how trucking saved her life as a single mother. But she doesn't clarify that her kids are, her youngest daughter's 37. I was a single mother too. My youngest is around the same age, maybe a couple years older. That means when I entered trucking 15 years ago, they were already old enough to take care of themselves. They weren't little kids that needed to, be driven to school. They could fend for themselves. So the going up to Capitol Hill and telling this sad story is really lobbying for the ATA and for Prime to get Prime more people into these training programs where they can lead them into lease purchase schemes. Now, DeSova turned in her lease purchase truck. I spoke to her on the phone when she was supposed to come give Tamara Brock her Queen of the Road Award in Las Vegas. And she told me it was way too much to pay for a truck. And she was woke and she saw what was going on. Well, now she's an instructor for Prime. So that means she's an employee. And when at the time that she went to Congress and spoke and has been letting them share her pictures all around on Capitol Hill about how California ruined her small business as an owner operator, which is a fabrication because you are not an owner operator, small business owner. You are a misclassified worker at Prime. She was an employee going up there talking on Capitol Hill. So not only is she woke, that means that she is willfully lying and misrepresenting herself for Prime and the ATA. And I made that very clear to the elected representatives who are seeing her picture and her film circulated around. I talked about third-party companies, walk-away leases in the letter. That's what I was in. I talked about how the company that I was associated with was under Celadon Group. And if you've been in trucking for any amount of time, then you remember that Celadon had fraud allegations. They were hiding their losses and inflating the truck values and engaging in deceptive swap transactions. They got sued for like $42 million or something like that. But what they did was they went by all these different names and they had people coming in buying them out, but then they do the same thing over again. So they were Quality Leasing, Element Leasing, Quality Companies, Quality Equipment Leasing, 19th Capital, Hillco Global, 19th Capital Group, H19, So there's all these different names. That the truck I had that's featured in the movie Driver that I was getting calls about, and those calls actually started coming over a year after I turned in the truck. And the reason is because it was a walkaway lease, which means when I went to get the truck, they just, say what company you're going to lease it onto. Oh, this one. Oh, okay, go pick one out. They don't get your social security number. You don't fill out credit application like you do to go buy a car or go through any kind of stuff, like Lone Mountain Truck is completely different. Like they actually want to make sure you got this much money in the bank. They're going to check all kinds of stuff. They're not just going to let you come in there and get a truck and drive out of there. So that so-called walkaway lease that I turned in when this company went bankrupt, which I knew they were I knew what they were doing when I turned in the truck. I knew what they were doing was that they were liquidating their assets without telling anybody. And they were calling drivers and telling them they owed more money than they owed to just shake them down and see what they could get because they knew that the doors were going to close soon. And I knew that. So that's why I wanted to go there in person and say that to him, like I did in the movie. And I knew other drivers that were getting the same calls. And I told them, stand up for yourself. Well, after we all turned in our trucks, about a year later, we start getting these calls from this Hilco Capital saying that we owe like 252,000, 600, some crazy amount. And they said, because you were obligated to lease it for a certain amount of time. So you have to fulfill. I'm like, no, that's not what it was. But they sell these collection lists or, when a company goes out of business, it's called a shit list, actually. It's a shit list. It's a list of shit and they sell them and people will buy them for whatever they buy them for, and then they just will call people and harass them to try and see if they could intimidate them to pay something. But I told them, like, you don't even have my social security number. I mean, what are you telling me about? Like, you don't even have any paperwork on me. You have my phone number, that's it. So I explained this also, and how these companies, you know they own the financing, they own the collection companies. They change their names, but they're all still doing all the same thing. It is predatory in every single freaking way. So I named some of the big players: Prime, CR England, CRST, Western, PAM, KLLM, and Super Ego. And that's a whole other that's a whole other ballpark right there, which leads into the cargo theft thing. So the letter ended up being, long, not as long as the cargo theft one. But I also explained, the practices of wage skimming. They can do that through not giving you your fuel discount. Um, they can do it through inflating the insurance. They can do it through all kinds of charges for bullshit until you don't get a fucking paycheck or you get a negative one. Um, I touched on foreign influence in our domestic supply chain, which everybody's hearing about right now with the immigrant drivers, but it's deeper than that because some of these companies have gotten into warehousing and 3PL and commercial insurance, and they came to the truck leasing meeting. They were in there listening to what was being said. Our website gets hit from Eastern European countries and Middle Eastern countries all the time. I get an alert. Okay, so I know they're reading all of this stuff. They know. Um, but drivers need to know more and they need to get involved more, because as these immigrant drivers go away, the ones that are really poised to take advantage of the situation is Prime and CR England, because they used to have like the lockdown on new entrants. And since this explosion of immigrant labor and these Amazon branded trailers and race to the bottom happened, They've had the corner on the market of that cheap student labor that they could coerce into doing a lot of stuff that you really shouldn't be doing, and it's not prosperous in the long run. It's sharecropper. You work hard and you end up paying back all the money to the landowner, and you have enough to eat. You can never get ahead as hard as you work. And that's what it is. It's a modern day plantation with trucks. I explained the two contract system, which touches a little bit on the broker transparency thing, where the driver gets a contract, but they never actually see the real actual rate contract. Some are not even allowed to have it. And the most insidious part of all of this is really where the trainer used to be a student who entered this and is not making the money that they thought they were going to make. They don't want to do team driving. They get encouraged to be a lease operator. Then they realize they can't make the payment. So they say, well, you can become a trainer. So now they're in the power position. So the victim has now become the perpetrator, and they have control over the student. So this isn't really entrepreneurship. It's modern day indentured servitude. It is disgusting how they kind of set us up to take advantage of each other. Like, everybody's struggling, especially with these freight rates. And now you're incentivizing people to put them in a fucked up situation that is fucked up because you couldn't even get through it. And it's not right. So finally, I attached some recent settlements that I got from a driver at Prime. I might share my screen because uh, I redacted his information. How do you do that? Share, share, share. Okay. And I'll just go through this. This is 4 weeks. And you can see that the weeks total, year to date total, lease to date. Okay. And this one, I don't know if I have this numbered or not. Yeah, this is settlement 1. So the gross paid to the operator so far for the year to date is $29,000. That's below the poverty level, and it is October. So there's only a few more. But look at this, look at these figures here. You can't control miles when the freight is slow. You can't promise people miles when freight's slow. I mean, it's just, and a lot of it has to do if you have a dispatcher that tries to help you out, but a lot of dispatchers are also incentivized to provoke the drivers. So look at the operating expenses here. Look at these figures, year to date total. And you just saw look at all of these things that the driver is paying. This is the second page of a 7-page settlement from Prime. Okay. I'm going to try to get through because I want to talk to you about this other letter. So I got 4. This is the part that has some of the loads, what they're getting paid per load and all of that kind of stuff. All right. And then you get to the final page here, negative $656.60 for 1,136 miles is all they had for that week. This is the next week. Okay. They're at 30. So this is the first one I showed you was the earliest. So we're going, this is the sex. So the last one I show you will be where they were at like a couple weeks ago. Okay. And we're pretty much almost to the end, halfway through the year. All right. So this week, that was the total revenue. All right. All these deductions, you know, let's see. They don't tell you all of this stuff in the beginning. Operating expenses, 3910. Okay. Let's get through to, I redacted as much as I could because I'm trying to protect them, but elected officials need to see these numbers. And this is the truck lease task force asked this. Like, if you think that your lease purchase program's so great, give us your model contract and show examples in paper, not just in words. And they wouldn't do that. So here you go. The driver had 1,924 miles and they got $590.86. Third week for this driver. We had a negative. See that? Total revenue from settlements, 7,271 and 39 cents. Okay. What's their check end up? $345.64. The driver got 2,915 miles for that week. That's less than minimum wage, people. And he ran his ass off. I mean, I know some of you would say 2,900 still isn't very much miles, but look at what he was getting before. He was sitting. He wasn't working. And there are things that I don't know. I don't know if he didn't want to work or there was no miles or whatever. But the bottom line is this in trucking. You can't predict miles in freight. I mean, we've been in a freight slump for so long. It's best to be a company driver when and be reefer, unless you got contract freight. And I know that Prime has contract freight. I know they have a lot of contracts, but all you need to do is piss off one person somewhere. It's very retaliatory. So if you rub somebody the wrong way, they're just going to make your life a living fucking hell. That's just the way it is. Here's the fourth settlement. 3,875 revenue, paycheck 589.14. 1,846 miles. So you can't survive that way.